I want to give. We're going to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions here. So I'm going to ask.
Let me chime in just 1 second.
Yeah. While he's answering that, if you want to ask a question, I would ask you to come up right up here, and I will bring a microphone over to you. So if you want to ask a question to one of these two, come on over there. Go ahead.
So one of the things that we did, I mentioned about the community and law enforcement being together. One of the things that we did that hurt ourselves significantly, and when I say we, I'm talking about law enforcement on a global level, United States. Is we took away the beat cop, right? So I see some older folks out there. You remember this.
The beat cop.
You remember the beat cop that was out walking the neighborhood. And that beat cop knew Reverend Adams when he was this big and Reverend Adams' parents, right? And he or she, well, he was almost all men then. He knew that Reverend Adams was doing something he wasn't supposed to do, and he would go pay a visit to the Mr. or Mrs. and say, hey, Junior's not holding up his end of the deal or whatever. And it was taken care of at home. And we, law enforcement, were much less threatening then, right? Because we were there in and amongst everybody because we were walking there and we knew. And then you fast forward with budget cuts and, the advent of technology and stuff. So now we in law enforcement can do our jobs, better, like the $6 million man, better, stronger, faster. We don't need 50 cops anymore. We can get by with 20.
Right.
So we put them in a patrol car and we took them out of the communities. So then there starts to be this gap. And that gap has only widened as society has went on too, because again, we've gotten better, stronger, faster. So the only time that there's interaction is when it's negative. I pull you over for speeding. I'm at your house investigating because your kid broke into something or whatever it is. There's not that beat cop that's walking down the street, picks up the basketball because the kids are playing at the dead-end street, right? I spent a little time in Lansing the first, till I was about 10, and it was a dead-end street. We played in the street. That's what the kids did, right? So that cop's not there. There's not that positive interaction. And then we, as a society, don't do ourselves any favor when it comes to law enforcement either, because the first thing that we're doing when we're in a meal break, and family A is over there sitting down. See, little Johnny? See that policeman over there? I'm gonna tell him you don't put your seatbelt on. He's gonna arrest you. No, no, that's not doing us any favors. So, anyways, because then again we become the bad guy, right? There's no humanization, I guess, if you will, and. Just one last thing on law enforcement, and Alex can attest to this. We're people too, right? Not only do we have our job to do, but we may be experiencing trouble at home, whether it's a spouse or whether it's a child issue or whether it's a babysitting issue or whatever the issue is, and couple that with the fact that our job is an emotional roller coaster. I use this one all the time. So we go out and police an accident scene where somebody died, and we got to go give death notification to next of kin. And then 2 hours later, I'm responding to a call where somebody got their laptop stolen out of their car because they left it unlocked, and I'm supposed to care, right? I'm supposed to be empathetic, like this, because this person's mad they got their stuff stolen, and rightly so. But they're expecting me to be, do a great job and to, oh, Mr. Adams, I'm so sorry, and dust for prints and call in CSI and blah, 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 blah. And I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about that death notification that I just gave. I don't really care about your laptop, right? So that's kind of that's kind of the psyche of a cop too. And to come full circle, so when we take the cops out of the community, call it a beat cop, call it whatever you want, when we lose that interaction, then the community and law enforcement do this, and they just continue, and it just gets wider and wider.
So you're talking about changing policing. You believe in some kind of, I think they talk to, that's the big word. Like, what do you support police reform, right? And so that's an example of a reform that you think is important.
So let me get on that soapbox just for 2 seconds. So, the whole
just for 2 seconds.
All right,
really,
1 minute. So the whole defund the police is not about, my understanding, is not doing away with all law enforcement, right? It's just diverting funds. I can tell you that there is not. I can't think of any police agency that can afford to be diverted anymore because we've lost a ton in the last 15 years. We truly have. Because of what I just said, we can do stuff better, stronger, faster, whatever. So those we end up being the counselor, the social worker, the psychiatrist, all of that
Lots
stuff.
demanded.
When we show up. And they're talking about diverting funds to those particular organizations to do that in service groups. My argument would be this. You've taken money away from all those service organizations already, right? And you didn't give it to the cops when that happened. Right. That's where we need to focus the money, and it needs to be additional money, not taking money from law enforcement.
You're talking about strengthening the support, the support, like the what they call wraparound services. I think is kind of how they would refer to it. Yeah, the wraparound services. So yeah.
Because the bottom line, what he's talking about is relationship building. Because when Rev said that he had a conversation with that police officer about his dad, about his brother, right? Mm-hmm. Grandfather, mm-hmm. Right? So his grandfather passed away eventually. That police officer now, they have a relationship. So when he sees something going down in the community that should not be going down, should not be happening, he can just pick up a phone, right? So there's some reporters that call the office and say, we want a quote from Reverend Adams about this, that, and the other. Okay, they may get it, they may not. But there's other reporters that I have a relationship with. And they call me. Charles, what do you think about this? Chris, what do you think about that? Rev, hey. They get their quote 99% of the time. It's about relationship building.
Strengthening relationship.
Those beat cops build those relationships.
Right.
Right? And that makes all the difference in the world. Because I don't want to see a social worker sometime. If that social worker, if we don't have relationships, if that social worker doesn't get me, right? So just to replace a police officer with a social worker, that's not going to do any good, because that social worker is going to end up calling the police when her or his life is threatened because they're trying to remove somebody's child from the home when they should have been building up a relationship over the years.
We're regarding methods here. I think you've talked about
tangent, and I got on his tangent.
All right, I got it. When you were saying about, you've said this before. You said there was at least when the George Floyd thing took place, there was a great emphasis. What's that?
You got one in the queue too.
Oh, okay. I got. Alex Lou. I'm sorry, Alex. I didn't know you were doing that.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. It's up to you.
Okay, so you're gonna say. So what you were gonna say? You said before. What I was gonna say means this, that you were. You said. Emphasis on chokeholds and on methods, that is not going to do it. Because that was the big emphasis. Instead, what you said was, it has to do with addressing the systemic issues that destabilize society. I feel like that's what you said in one time. I feel like I'm quoting you accurately. Do you believe that? Is that am I?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for tasers instead of just So you're
all for tasers
options.
Quote that.
You can die from a taser, right?
Yeah.
We saw the state police officer hit that kid on a taser on his mini bike, and he ran into a car. So I think if you're really talking about, I'm all for body cams and all kind of stuff, and on their side to provide them funding so they can have body armor and protective equipment to for their safety, so they make it home at night. But at the same time, you have to look at the deeper issues. That's just a step in a long journey. Body cameras, but great for the body cameras. Videos are great, but they can show you what they want you to see. You know, they killed that kid, Hakeem Middleton. I get it. But if a guy shoots at me and I have a gun, I'm a civilian, right? And I'm going to defend myself. So I can imagine police officers, and to God be the glory, that police officer that killed that was a part of it, didn't even have a gun.
Mm.
But I later heard there was 2 shots to his head and all that, and nobody ever mentioned that in the press conference. You can't see it in the video. The actual lethal shot that killed him is really unclear. So, I mean, there has to be something more than that, okay? That ultimately, I need to see Hakeem before he's standing before the police with a gun in his hand. I need to work with Hakeem. You need to work with Hakeem. We need to work with the Hakeems of the world before it gets to that point. Like, what was missing?
It's like we're jumping
That's not
on
in the video.
We're
It's not in
jumping
the
in
body
on the
cam
story.
video.
We're jumping in the story late.
Yeah.
We're jumping in like kind of like middle of like the this last chapter, and we don't have
become
any
judge
idea what
and
happened
jury
before.
based on the body cam evidence.
I got it. That's
I'm sorry.
well said. Alex, you want to go ahead?
Yep. So thank you for mentioning Livingston County, Wayne County, Oakland County. Sheriff, you mentioned an hour drive one way, bedroom communities. Maybe they're driving to Lansing, maybe they're driving to Detroit for work. But the mention of the different counties is the base of the question, because there is a distance that is tied to the automobile for sure. My question is about history and how history has played a part in the distance. Because there was a time when all the jobs were centrally located and there was no monstrous commute. But there were things put in play, law enforcement being a part of that, citizens being a part of that, that began to further the distance. And so now cops regularly drive 40 minutes, 55 minutes, an hour and 10 minutes to get to a job. Regularly, people in Livingston County drive an hour at peril of their home life, their marital satisfaction, just to keep the 5 bedrooms and the 3.5 baths going and the sprawling estate, to get the Camaro for the 16, 17-year-old. My question is about why we are driving so far, why we're so far apart, and why Oakland County borders Wayne County, but the demographics are so starkly opposed. Oakland County's prosperous. Wayne County is one of the poorest in the state, in the country. Your words, not mine. Livingston County, a half an hour from Wayne County. Prosperity by the elected official, the testimony I believe to be true. A half an hour away, a citizen of the city won't send a child up the block. I was one of those children. I went to the Grosse Pointe Academy because my parents opted to do exactly what you suggested. My question is, what role does history play in that, and how is history affecting what we're doing today?
I'll take that one. 2 seconds. So we as a society started to do the American dream thing, right? It's the house, it's the white picket fence. And again, for all the old people out there with a lot of gray hair, you used to have a front porch. And you used to sit on the front porch because you all were in a neighborhood. And as the urban sprawl came, because we had to have the white picket fence and a little bit bigger yard and a little bit more property and blah, blah, blah. And I think the reason that we did that is because life got way, way, way more complicated than it ever has been. So we do the urban sprawl thing and we eliminate the front porch. Now what do we have? We got air conditioning. but what else do we have? We have a back deck. Right? Everybody goes out on the back deck.
Yeah.
So you didn't even see your neighbors. There's people in subdivisions that have lived there for 5 or 6 years and have no damn clue who their neighbors are. You guys, that's crazy to me. But that's
Yeah, that's right. He's
that's
okay.
It's in the Bible, right?
It's okay. Yeah, damn is in the Bible. Okay, there you go. That's right.
Sorry, I got all fired up there for a minute.
That's
that was
all
more
right.
than 2 seconds, but I'm done.
You did that was.
I passed the torch.
We've kind of taken the code. The 2 seconds means something else.
1 minute.
Anyway, that's right. Good.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that what we have to embrace is accountability. So I'll use the example as a man again. I have to accept the accountability that says you are, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disclude. You were the only one over there. I've been looking. But I need to accept the accountability that holds me accountable for my sexism. It's, I need women to tell me that, right? I don't want them to internalize, the misinterpretations of biblical texts, the structure of society, that the hierarchies. I need women to say, hey, look, I need, you're great on one thing, but you need to shore this other thing up. 'Cause that's the only way we're going to move society along. There's pay discrepancies. Some of the sisters in the American Baptist Convention did a study that the church is one of the worst offenders when it comes to pay disparities with men and women. I said, wow. So when we hired it was crazy. We hired a lady to be on our staff. She was retired. So there's this conversation with my financial officers that said, well, look, she gets her retirement. So that ought to give us a little leeway. We don't have to give her as much as we gave her predecessor. I said, absolutely not. I said, I'm not going to be a part of that. What she gets in her retirement, that's her business. That has nothing to do with us. We're not going to have a woman come on staff and make half of what the man did who occupied the seat before she got there. That her personal business is none of our business. And we have to be careful. But I need women. I had to have those women in ABC convention tell me that, or I never would have thought about it. I never would have thought about, okay, if I have a woman preach on the first Sunday, if there's a month of scheduling, then I need to make sure it's male, female, you know what I'm saying? Or if it's like 7 last words or something. I need to make sure there's. So I said all that to say, that was a lot to say.
It was 2 minutes.
That was 5 seconds.
That's 5 seconds.
I'm on the soapbox. But I'm just saying that, okay, those officers bring more into the situation than fatigue from a long commute. They bring in their racial attitudes. They bring in their attitudes towards sex. They bring in their attitude towards gender, or I guess that's what I meant by sex. I meant the other thing that we.
You could mean the other thing too.
That type of stuff. If they, they bring that into the equation, right? So, officers, churches, men, women, everybody under God's green earth must accept accountability. Just like we accept accountability to them for adherence to the law, they need somebody to be accountable to, not just internal investigations. That's great, right? But they should embrace citizens watch groups and different advocacy groups, and like you say, build those relationships with them.
I appreciate. And one thing I was just thinking about is you're saying, I'm going to give Lori a chance here, and the sun is drawing low here. Oh, you have one too, Sherry? Okay, we got 2. That we need each other to hold us accountable. And that like you said before, said, I need women in my life to be able to hold me accountable to the sexism that's in my life. And so what's really interesting is, as we have increasingly homogenous communities, if we don't have people of color around us, then we are not held accountable. Then we can't be held accountable for the biases or for the racism that we might hold, right? That's what we are missing out by walling ourselves off from other counties.
Or
And-
a set of rules.
Right.
So you don't have any black people, but you still have a set of rules in place that's going to hold everybody accountable for how they treat one another. But go ahead.
Yeah. So well, I think Alex's initial question was the whole about the distance and how that affects things, and I think we've kind of talked a little bit about that. But I just want to make sure, Lori, and then yes, we got 3 here. Go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to say, address Christian Adams on the sexism thing. I find it appalling that you can no longer compliment me if I'm wearing a nice dress or the right color. Because I can say that to Sherry. I can say, oh, you look fabulous. And that's okay. But if you say it, it's sexist. And I think women need to step back and take a compliment when we're given a compliment. Amen. Because gentlemen are just trying to be gentlemen. Now, here's my question for both of you. There's a lot of talk now of taking out the school resource officer. I never had a resource officer until I was in high school. And where I went to high school in the city that I grew up in, I actually went to the richest high school. My parents were middle class, being my dad was retired Air Force. But there was a lot of drugs in my school. A lot more drugs in my school than in the other schools. The only other school that compared to it was the poorest school in the district. And what do you think of taking that school resource officer out of there? Excuse me, because we all knew who he was. It was no big secret. He walked the halls during class and in between classes. We all knew who he was, and he knew who everybody was and what they were up to.
Biggest mistake ever would be to take them out of there, and frankly, we should be adding school resource officers just from what I said earlier about those relationships. So listen, we were sold a bill of goods that school resource officers were going to prevent school shootings. And maybe there's been an incident or two where that stuck in somebody's mind that said, oh crap, there's a school resource officer here. But you been in a high school lately? They're huge. And if I'm a bad guy, can I say hell?
You've already said crap and
Okay,
damn.
all right.
Go ahead.
If I'm hell bent
Bible.
if I'm hell bent on killing people, I'm going to kill people. It's just that simple. School resource officer or not, and I'm going to get a bunch before he or she gets me. But what that school resource officer does, like Lori said, they know who's doing what, and they can have that conversation with mom or dad. If mom or dad's not receptive, they can go to the juvenile court system and say, hey, we might want to petition this kid and get him into some services. There's other avenues that they can pursue. But the byproduct of that is, again, those relationships. That starts to build that law enforcement and community back together. And the cops aren't necessarily the bad guys. My favorite schools to go into are elementary because they still love us, right? They give us high five. You walk down the hallway with your hand up like this, and kids are falling all over themselves to give you a high five. I love that. And then you get into junior high and high school, and they're like, oh,
It's because of the structure,
turn,
right?
They just turn the other way.
Yeah.
You know, so that happens. But anyways, huge proponent of school resource officers.
I'll just say, and when we ask ourselves, well, why isn't the money there for school resource officers? Why isn't the money there for beat cops? Why isn't there? I think we have to ask ourselves, where's that money? It's in somebody's pocket, and it destabilizes the society that greedy person has to live in. So ultimately, greed is self-defeating. But it's hard to convince people about that, because when you tell them that, they act like you're trying to take money away from them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we change the way we distribute resources, it's going to be a win for everybody.
Sure.
Like that lottery money. But anyway. My question is to the sheriff. How can you, law enforcement teach the public, the Karens of the world? You are not the police. We are the police. You watch these videos on social media, even with Aubrey, he wasn't obeying basic commands. Sir, you know, I don't understand the nosiness of it. Just because you see somebody you don't know, who are you to ask somebody, who are you? Because if somebody says it to me, I'm going to try to ignore you, but if you keep talking, it's not going to end as well as it has been ending for other people on these videos. But how do we get the community to not be so suspicious every time you see a black person? Like, everybody that you see, not even thinking about you. If I'm in the exercise room and I'm exercising, why is that bothering you? Why do you need to say, I've never seen you before? You know, am I spray painting on the wall? Most of these people aren't even doing anything. And even when you think you see somebody doing something, most of the time they're wrong. What about the person that called the police on the guy? He had locked his keys in his car. He was trying to get his keys out. That escalated into like drama, and she was just wrong. You know, so my question is, do you ever think about how law enforcement can deal with the public to stay in their place?
So it's kind of a dual-edged sword, right? Because we have asked the public to report things that are suspicious and that don't look right. However, that said, and I can tell you, and Nick will attest to this too, if you listen to, with technology, you can listen to the police scanner on your phone now, right? And it would not be uncommon in this county to say, whatever, got a suspicious situation at, walk and don't walk. And the officer, whether it's my deputies or anybody else, come back on the radio and ask dispatch, what's suspicious about the person or what's suspicious about the situation? They will respond, and the officer, trooper, deputy will say, okay, I'll be en route, or that's not suspicious. You know what I'm saying? So we give our folks a lot of discretion to make the right, decision and base it on, like you said, what is suspicious about that? Now, the car key issue, if I got somebody that looks like they're trying to Slim Jim a car, and we got that call and said, well, what's suspicious? Well, it looks like they're trying to break into a car. Okay, we're coming. Well, it's a black person. Really? No, we're not coming, Or they just look out of place. No, we're not coming, I think one of the things that we do is we do a Citizens Academy to kind of bring the community into us, so they can kind of understand our psyche a little bit and why our policies and procedures are the way that they are. The unfortunate part about that is, it's 20 people at a time, Mm-hmm. So, but I'm a firm believer in the whole ripple effect, too, on a lot of things, So when you're having a conversation, when you and the ladies are playing cards or whatever, and somebody says, well, X, Y, Z, and you go, no, you know what? I went through that Citizens Academy, and that's not necessarily true. Maybe that's how it is on TV, but I don't really have a good answer for you.
So part of it is to train. There's the train officers and also train
We need
citizens.
to be receptive, as Christian Adams said. We need to be receptive to. So cops again did ourselves a big disservice way back when with the whole blue curtain thing, where no, that's none of your business. We'll take care of it. We're the cops. No, no. There's things that we can't tell you, and there's things that I'm not going to tell you. But that's investigative stuff that would hinder us in our ability to find the bad guy. But I'm all about transparency otherwise. It's got to be that way. It just has to be that way because it builds trust.
And I just say this, a lot of our attitudes are based on, as Reverend said, history. So we treat people the way we're taught. And it really, we need to rethink and reevaluate. It will do us good. I mean, has anybody ever felt sorry for the police officers involved in some of these shootings? I mean, right? Like, I felt bad. I mean, this guy lost his career. In some cases, they lose their freedom. I mean, I can't imagine if the cops in Atlanta, they were, and I don't know if cops is a good word, if you like that. Okay.
I don't
but,
care.
The cops in he used it. I noticed he didn't flinch, but the cops in Atlanta, they I think they honestly tried to work with, I forget the motorist's name that got killed at the Wendy's.
Yeah.
And they had like a 30-minute thing where they were trying to establish whether he was intoxicated or not. And I really saw that initially they were patient, but they ended up killing him, shooting him to death, and they didn't have to. So they lost their jobs, they lost their I can't imagine they woke up that morning saying, I'm going to go kill a black man, right? But it goes into attitudes. And once again, just to help you relate to it, I'll go back to the sexism issue. When you see a woman, what do you see? Do you see a plaything? Do you see somebody who's inferior? Do you see, right, a president? Do you see a superior? Do you see a boss? Do you see an employee? And a lot of that has been ingrained into us before we go into those encounters. And if we make the wrong decision, if we evaluate mistakenly, it could have some serious repercussions.
That we got to live with.
When she says no, what does that mean to you? Right? And if you make the wrong call, that could be devastating. And we really, a lot of men need to reteach their boys, because you can't leave it to the back of the bus. You know, before sex education, there was a guy named Chip, and it was one of my peers that told me everything that my parents would not in the back of the bus on the way to camp, right? He told me about human anatomy. He told me what happens, where babies come from, all of that, way before 7th grade sex education, right? So what I'm saying is, how are we teaching our young people to look at the other? And that's why when they see, but then we got to take personal responsibility so that we don't become poster children for mediocrity.
First of all, thank you, everybody, for coming. DJ, thanks for hosting. Alex, I had a question for you. When you travel with, is it with the East Lansing Police? Lansing Police, do they wear body cameras?
Yes.
They do, okay. How do you feel about body cameras?
So the question is, how do I feel about body cameras? And I feel that body cameras are a response to a public outcry. I feel like body cameras are a response to a public outcry. So they have been introduced within the last, how many years?
Yeah, 5 probably.
5 years. Before they were introduced, they seemed a figment of a paranoid imagination. That you could take a cycloptic eye, put it on a cop's chest, and see and hear police encounters, day or night, nationwide, coast to coast. And that you could have immediate downloads of that data on a daily basis per shift and be able to scroll through a cop's encounters. That was science fiction. But they're there. To the commentary earlier, they're there, but they also add a layer to the policing encounter that wasn't there before. For lack of a better term, I'm not as eloquent as the gentleman, there's a theatrical aspect. It's kind of scripted. And that is to the benefit and to the detriment. I raise support as a missionary. And so one of the things that I do is I cast vision, I invite people into the great adventure, and I ask them to partner with prayer and financial support. That's how we're able to show up and do what we do. Train, show up, and serve. People partner. but it's a nerve-wracking part of what I do as a missionary. It's just nerve-wracking. And so we're given a script. And we say, look, when you feel nervous and anxious, read this and kind of get back on track, because you wrote this when you were clear about what your vision is. My experience is that cops, sheriff can speak to this much more excellently than I can, have a script. And a part of that is because it's a high stress situation. You're in a pressure cooker. So if you're trained on a script, right, when your heart's beating 125 a minute and that adrenal dump is hitting you, if that script is on the back burner someplace and you can fumble for it and reach for it in an acute situation and pull it out and have that tumble out of your mouth verbatim on memory while you're on camera, that's a beautiful thing. Because that still affects the environment, even though that might not be really what you're feeling, but you've been trained with that script. They're a small part of a larger solution, but they are encouraging evidence that when we dream and plan, and when we're intentional about feedback from the policed populations, that innovations can be introduced.
So I'll take just a little different stance on that one. We don't have body cams. I think we will, and it's not a matter of money, quite frankly. That's a decision that I've made. We will eventually have them, but here's my major issues with body cams right now. So when they first came out, there was no trust there that the cops wouldn't alter them. Right? So the video was unalterable, uneditable. So then they moved forward and said, well, that's not very good. We need to be able to edit this thing because there's things that we don't want out there in the general public. And then that raises the question, well, if you have this particular shooting, did somebody alter it? Is there a mess, whatever. So, but to really dumb this thing down, and sorry for that poor choice of words, I'm really blowing it tonight, DJ, sorry.
No, you're batting
But
1,000.
anyways, I'm batting 1,000. So to really dumb it down, this is where I'm at with body cams, and this is why. So we have this thing called FOIA, Freedom of Information, right, to be more transparent. So me as a governmental agency, you as an individual can say, I want these records that you possess, police department, okay, and I have to provide those. So Deputy A goes out on his shift, and she handles a crash where there's maybe some significant injury. Okay. And then they go take a break-in report at your house. And then they go to a domestic, sorry, Heather, at DJ's house. And then they and then they go to maybe an out-of-control juvenile or something like that. Okay. You say, I want to FOIA that body cam from Mike Murphy's shift. I have to provide that. But then I have to make a decision what needs to be redacted out of that and what doesn't. So as a bad guy, thinking like a bad guy, I now have the floor plan of Reverend Adams' house because I was there on a break-in. I know that there's a jewelry box that sits on top of the dresser, right? I know that there's a Porsche in the garage. I know that there's, whatever. I go to DJ's domestic, and now I've got Heather sitting there crying at her worst moment because DJ whooped on her. I see this accident where maybe there was probably something that people shouldn't see. You see what I'm saying? So all of that is left up to our discretion on what to redact, and we're not always going to get it right. So my biggest fear is having something that's released to the public that probably shouldn't have been released. And I'm not talking about a shoot. I'm not talking about a major. I'm talking about something just that simple. And I don't want to have to look you in the eye, have you in my office and say, how dare you release this when my 14-year-old or whatever was having this major meltdown and we had a family issue and you were here. How can that? And once it's out there, it's already out there, right? So I'm more comfortable. I don't have to produce a document I can't produce a document that I don't have. And if I don't have that body cam, that just takes it away from me. So Eventually, I'm sure we'll end up there, but that's where I'm at right now.
So, and the mosquitoes are getting ravenous, and I want to give Mary a chance to ask her question. But what I hear really kind of actually from both of you is that Alex kind of said, really didn't necessarily come out and support it, but necessarily said, this is an inevitable, this is what the public has been wanting. My concern is the fact that it's
a privacy issue.
It's a privacy issue that it's being how do I say it? It's being just simply kind of dumped onto the public, and they don't have a sense of the whole story. But what I sense from both of you at the same time is it's inevitable. Okay. Mary.
Okay. First of all, thank you for what you said. That's why I decided to come down here. So when I moved here 30 years ago to Livingston County and lived in the country over here from California, there was a cross burning over here. And I went, what the heck? And where did we move to? And where are we? And I don't mean that funny. I was like horrified.
Yeah.
As I learned more going on, it's been, I think things have gotten better. But there is a lot of work to do, a whole lot of work to do. And I was reminded of that when I joined Pastor Whiten's group. I don't know what's happened with that. I want to follow up on that because it's an AME church in town, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for because I want to know what I can do. From that group, I was able to find some book, one's called White Fragility, but the one I really want to get into is called My Mother's Hand, and I can't remember the author's name, but he is a therapist. Funny, that's my profession, so I kind of got drawn to that. But he has 3 sections, one for white people, one for black people, and one for police. And the questions, I couldn't even get through the first part of mine because the questions were so like, oh my God, I can't even go there. So I think the reason that prompted me to come down here was just to say thank you, first of all, for all of you being here, but also what do we do now? There's a lot of things that we talk about, and we've talked about and talked about. I mean, I've been around for a long time. I've been here when Black Panthers were in, and I was trying to figure out how to do that, but I kind of didn't quite fit in. So, but I really want to know what we are going to do in this county that is so white, and what are we going to learn? How are we going to learn? Just the little bit that I have read so far makes me go like almost cringe inside. Like, oh my God, did I it just is making me go. And I still feel like we're even at that meeting that we had. Did people listen to those folks that were talking? Did they really take it in? And I'm not sure that that's what happened. And so I don't know, frankly, but I think there needs to be some very candid conversations about the pain and the hurt that is probably on both sides, but differently. And how do we get through that? And how can we finally, after the 40 years that that's probably more than that, 50 years that I have been since I was a teenager, trying to figure out how do I get into this, and how and this many years later in this county, how? It's time to get up and move. It's time to get up and ask the questions. It's time to get up and actually sort through all of this in a viable way that comes to a point where human beings are equal, where we are on the same place with one another, because we are not. And it just, and for me sometimes it gets in the way because I don't know what words to use. I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know what the right words are, and I want the right words. And sometimes I think that probably it's just going to be saying the words and then catch it, and then work through it. But we've got to do movement in this county, because that cross cannot be burned up there again like it was 30 years ago. That just can't happen because it's not over with here.
So the question that I said, the central question, and this is the take it home kind of question.
I
Thank you,
will,
perfect one.
I can't
What do we do?
I can't answer the question, but I can applaud the spirit because that's the attitude. And ultimately, what we have to realize is prejudice, inequality, that's sin. And there's no way to win with sin. I think I made a slogan. There is no way to win with sin. Can I get a quick a patent on that or something? Make it a T-shirt. Because, like I said, those officers suffered just as much as George Floyd. And even if they aren't held legally accountable, one day we all must stand before God. And even if somehow we fix that, right? And thank God for grace. You still have to live your life knowing that you have had that kind of impact on somebody else's life. And I don't believe that's anybody's intention. And what you're doing is taking personal responsibility for your deliverance and your redemption and society's redemption, right? Because you're not going to fall into that trap. You're not going to live your life like that. And you don't want to see other people do it. So you're in reaching out to a group in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, you are getting that accountability we were talking about earlier. And I think it's just so easy for people to say, hey, look, that's just the way it is. It's not my problem. I'm a good guy. I'm a good woman. It's not my issue. It's not my concern. But yes, it is. Because we're born in sin. We're shapen in iniquity. And that affects the way we view other people. There's a reason why somebody burnt that cross, whether it was a kid or whether it was a holdover from the old days, right? There was a reason why they did that. They are not above redemption, but they're going to have to work at it. They're going to have to work at it. And there's a longer journey. Like, the short journey is we need laws to keep you from lynching. Then that'll hit you later. But the journey of love, to teach us how to love people right, that's a much longer journey. And what I say is, hey, let's get the laws in place to keep the lynchings down, and then as a church, we can teach people how to love. And that's why everybody should be a part of a spiritual family. Everybody should want to grow spiritually. Everybody should be in the church, because it's ultimately self-defeating not to have that accountability. And so I'll turn it over to Sheriff.
I'll just say this. I don't know that we do anything, Mary, like from a rah-rah, what's the word I'm looking for, big civic thing. I know there's, it's already happened, but it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't work, because only typically the people that show up are the people that are interested, just like you all here tonight, right? We're all somewhat on the same page. I think that it just needs to be done one person at a time, right? We did not get in this mess overnight. We're not going to get out of this mess overnight. And it just needs to be open, honest, compassionate conversation. Like I said before, we all have our own life experiences and our own lenses that we look through. And we just I need to be able to sit down with Reverend Adams and express how I feel. They're my feelings. He needs to be able to express how he feels. They're his feelings. That's not a license for me to lop his head off. That's not a license for him to lop my head off, right? But that's where we're at today. We are so quick to judge, and we're so quick to slam. And social media has made it way, way, way too easy, because I don't have to sit across the table and look him in the eye, right? That's what's missing today. But anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. So I think we need to just do what this group, are doing. When you see something that's wrong, you need to be able to, you need to be able to say something.
And so I'm here because of Mike's comment earlier about the ripple effect. So it's poignant that he is sitting in front of the cross, that I was sitting 3 rows back, and that his word about the ripple effect got me out of my seat to answer your question about what do we do. The only reason why I ride with cops, show up and train and ride and follow up and live the life of a missionary is because I was in the prayer closet telling the Lord about my fear of living in Okemos and being afraid of losing it all. That I was scared of the cops, and the Lord said to me, you're afraid of the cops, Alex, but do you fear me? I said, I fear you above all, Lord. You're my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Just a prayer meeting, me and the Lord. And from that confession grew a ministry outreach to cops, because I did exactly what Mike talked about tonight. I went and I signed up for a Citizens Police Academy. I'm walking in there. Mike, you're not I called it snitch school, okay? Right? Because who sits in the police station for 9 Thursday nights in a row learning about law enforcement except the snitch? And so that's where I'm from. You do not walk into the police station for anything unless they're dragging you in there. Okay? So for me to step across that threshold and voluntarily sign my name, right, and drink the bottled water and the coffee that night, you a snitch. What did you say? She said, yeah. Right? And so but why was I going to snitch school? Because I was in a faith community that taught me, Reverend Adams said, to present myself before the Father. And I heard the Lord say, go down there and make some friends.
My Lord.
And so I did. I went down there, and what I found out was that cops have pain. I signed up for a ride-along, and I did a ride-along with a cop. He was about 6'3", 6'4", 350 pounds. My worst nightmare ever. It was me and him in Ingham County at night, okay? And we're patrolling East Lansing. It's all good, street lights, sidewalks, but he swung out into the county. Deer, possum, raccoons, right? Yeah. And he's riding around on these dirt roads, and he's not saying very much. And I'm having a little panic attack because I realized I have no idea where he's taking me. And it's the exact place I never wanted to be. So he parked under a tree, killed the lights, set a speed trap, and he started sharing his pain with me. And I prayed with him that night over his pain. I said, I didn't know you hurt like that. He said, I do. He opened up his world. I prayed for him. I went home. When I went home, I was still scared of the cops, but I wasn't scared of him. And that burden for him grew into a burden for another cop, because I met another one, and then another one, and then another one. And God began to open up a space that had been sealed by fear in my life, and began to open that thing up, and it began to gush compassion because the Lord said so in my life. That's the only reason. And from that ride along to today, the only reason why I run with cops is because I believe the Lord is calling me to do that. Now, to your question, what do? I think we do the same thing that happened to me, because it's happening to you. What are you doing in Livingston County looking for AMEs? That's a little odd, right? But it's the beginning. You said not for you. It's the beginning. Right? And you're not the only one. We all have the ability to have a personal relationship, a personal encounter with the Almighty. And so here's my plug, my invitation, not only you, but to everyone listening. 4050, the number 40, number 50, wordproject.org. Out of California, oddly enough, Beverly Hills. Okay? There's a church in Beverly Hills called Hope in the Hills. And they is the church. They are fasting and praying for 40 days over 50 states, thus the 4050 project. 40 days over 50 states, fasting to, let me just read their language because it's better than anything that I could ever say. And so what they're doing is they're fasting. Imagine America racism free. What do you see amid our national crisis? of race, we are being called to come together in unity, to fast and pray, to break the strongholds of 5 centuries of systemic racism, oppression, and violence on American soil. Visionaries spanning 50 states will journey together for 40 days of prayer, fasting, and action. That's what you're looking for. Action. To intercede to heal our racial divide. And so if you're looking for something to do, I encourage you to get on your face and surrender your life again to the Savior. To open your ear gate and listen for the voice of the Holy Spirit. And when the Spirit moves, when the Spirit speaks, that you move. For me, it was a ride along, and then another, and then another. And it opened up into a chaplaincy. Who knew? But for you, it begins with prayer, and fasting is the megaphone of the Holy Ghost.
That's good.
Thank you all for staying here and for hearing these guys. Can we just express
go over?
our thing? We went way over. You were
DJ
just
said
2
90 minutes. I'm not, you know.
We just went 2 seconds, just 2 seconds over. So would you guys would just let them know that you? Thank you. We're going to have another one of these fireside conversations, just so you know, and it's going to be on August the 28th. We're having Buddy Morehouse come, and he's going to be talking to us about that exact situation that took place, the cross burning, and the presence of the Klan within Livingston County, and then what we as what people can faith and just people from around the community really can do to address these certain issues. So thank you for staying. Sherry, would you just close us today? Close us with one last song.